It said that the easy challenges for digitization have been solved, so now we must figure out the difficult problems. Our guest on this segment of TI Now from TIA's Connectivity Jam in Dallas, Texas will give us some perspective on these challenges and how we plan to solve them. Joining us are Kevin Schatzkamer, he's Vice President of Service Provider Solutions and Strategy at Dell EMC. We also have David Tenenhouse, he's Chief Research Officer at VMware. Next is Adam Drobot, he's Chairman at OpenTechWorks. And Amit Tiwari on the end, he's Vice President of Strategic Alliances and Systems Engineering at Affirmed Networks. And a panelist, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Now, of course, we were all part of TIA's CTO Council meeting here at the Connectivity Jam in Dallas. First of all, before we get into sort of the content that came out of that meeting, just on a general sense, and I'll go down the line very, very quickly, what was your general feeling from the meeting? Amit, I'll start with you.
This is a very relevant aspect of this evolution towards virtualization and software-defined networking. Digitization overall is what we are getting to for every functional element, every business need, once we laid the framework for NFV and SDN. So I think it's very timely, and it was a very good discussion out here.
Okay. I think of it partially as the network, but really on the consumer end, everything we do as products, everything we do as services is coming in digital form. So I think as somebody said during the meeting, anything that can be digitized will be, and the networks have to have the capacity to carry it. The computing plant has to support the services that allow you to do the analysis. Okay? And so this is a progression we see going on for the next 20 to 30 years.
David?
And Adam, it has to do with also how the processes and business models change. And I thought it was really great that we had in the meeting with us some customers that were kind of telling us about the problems of universities, the problems in the public sector, the problems in broadcasting. So that, I think, really made for a great meeting.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's always benefits in getting industry leaders together across lots of different areas to sit down and talk about some of the deep challenges facing all of us. And virtualization, digitization is certainly one of them. I think the end goal with any new technology deployment is not to accrue too much technical debt. So if there's opportunities to learn from across the industry with data points where implementations have been successful, it's always good.
Yeah. Adam, I mentioned in the introduction that that really the easy challenges regarding digitization have been solved, and now we have to really face the hard challenges. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I'm actually going to say the following. What's easy for one person is hard for another.
Right.
Okay. So there are a lot of people still struggling with the early stuff. Okay. And in fact, this is a cultural thing. How do you get a set of customers across enterprises, in government, okay, and in the consumer space who are comfortable with what we're trying to actually produce at this point?
I think everyone starts from a different foundation, right? So I think that past experiences make some problems easier to solve than others. In the telecommunications world, I think we often say there's no new problem, just a re-implementation and new naming of the same old problems with the same old set of solutions. We can think about SDN in a similar context. We could think about virtualization in a similar context. And kind of across the board, all of the things we're doing as an industry, we've seen inklings or pieces of these problems before. It's just all coming at us faster.
So.
I think some of this, easy, difficult part is also just timeline, right? 20 years ago, we knew that we needed to start networking all these IoT devices, but we didn't know how to do it. So that was a hard problem. Now we've sort of got that problem under control, looks better. So now we go on to other problems. And I think that's kind of the way in technology. In the AI world, it's kind of the case that as soon as you solve part of a problem, we call that automation. And what's left is AI. AI is always the part that's not solved yet.
You immediately discover the next hard problem down the line. So.
What we notice very, very clearly is different organizations have had a certain advantage and expertise in different parts of the journey. And as is natural instinct, people are approaching this from what they know best. So there are folks who are actually farther along the technology adoption curve. They're actually working on the organizational transformation. There are folks who actually have a nimble organization, and with less of an experience in the technology evolution, they're leveraging their organizational agility and nimbleness to actually adapt the technology. So different folks are leveraging what they know best, and that is a very positive sign in this overall evolution.
Yeah, that's actually very well said.
I agree with that as well, right? I think we always get stuck as an industry at trying to figure out if this is a technology evolution, an operational evolution, or a monetization and use case evolution.
All of the
The answer is
above.
Absolutely.
All of the above.
So which problem do you tackle first?
Exactly.
I think one thing was interesting from the very beginning of the CTO council meeting was, and I think it was Brad Wall that said this, that metadata is the currency of the future, and he was really talking about how it's more difficult for him in his business to create that metadata experience rather than maybe an over-the-top player. Amit, I'll start with you. What does metadata being the currency of the future mean to you?
It couldn't have been said clearer. When you realize as the networks are getting virtualized and more of the subscribers are beginning to do more and more digital functions, metadata is really what drives the analysis of behavior, right? You know, you look at metadata, what was a silo in the past now is part of the ocean as a whole. Really, if you think of it in those terms, right? Metadata is the current that connects the river to the ocean to the waterfall. I mean, to use that analogy, metadata is what connects behavior, metadata is what connects the insightful analysis from different parts of data. As more and more of digitization takes place globally and in different corporations, subscriber, enterprise, IoT, metadata is what drives a lot of the insights and hence the actions that help us make the intelligence of the network real.
Yeah. So I mean, I can think of a couple of simple things. One from the entertainment end. You know, you're watching a film or something of that sort, okay, and you want to know something about an actor, a character, an event. How do you search for it? Okay? So unless you tag it with the metadata, very hard to do. Okay? So I mean, that's on the entertainment side. If I look at a simple thing, let's say like temperature, inside a truck that's carrying groceries or something of that sort. Okay, I want to know the spot. When did I hit my highest temperature? Was the door open at that point? Okay, so there's the provenance that goes along with the data. Okay? And so it's easy to record simple things like, here's the temperature, I have something that reads it out, but what else was going on that makes that meaningful? That's a lot harder to come by. Okay?
I think that's something we're going to see really making progress in the IoT space. And in fact, you know, we think in terms of not just big data, which is going to be used for the long-term analysis, but the little data, right? The operational data that you collect. So you don't just want to collect the temperature, you actually want to know which sensor was it, what's the provenance of that sensor, can I trust it? What's the calibration of that sensor?
Who touched it last?
You know, what's the accuracy? So we can evaluate that data. So for each little bit of data, each temperature reading, there's going to be other little data surrounding it.
That may be a lot more data than the original data, by a lot.
And that's going to provide that operational setting for people to make the near-term responses, take the near-term actions. And then there'll also be big data processing in order to find the patterns, the correlations, and do the kind of longer-term efficiency adjustments.
Right. If we think about where we are as an industry, right, and we talk about this concepts of automation and orchestration, I think we're at the point now where we really understand how to be able to really automate the underlying infrastructure and how to make the infrastructure respond to the policies and logic and the decisions that are made above it. Right. What we haven't done yet is to automate the policy and the logic and the decisions. Right, and that's where artificial intelligence and machine learning and leveraging more and more metadata really come into play. Is that when we have the right amount of information, we can start to get to the point where we automate the logic.
David, you mentioned operationalizing digitization. I want to get to that in just a moment, but beforehand, Adam, you mentioned this, and I feel like this will set the tone for that discussion. You said there's two ends of digitization. There's operational and functional. Can you explain that?
Okay, sure. So I can think of it this way, and I'll use the previous metaphor. If I want to measure your temperature and capture that, okay, as an individual, I think of that as something that's functional. Okay? I got the temperature, I have a sensor for it, I can collect the data. Now imagine doing it for an area like New York. I got 20 million people. Okay? I'm collecting data from 20 million people. One of them is out of whack. Okay? What do I do about it? Okay? What happens if my communication system goes down? Okay? How do I bring it back up? Okay? Those start to be sort of the operational issues. And they deal with scale, okay? They deal with size, they deal with how decision making is made, okay? And those tend to be, in fact, the more difficult part of this whole game, because this is where the logic is in some ways.
I also think it deals with the time domain, right? So,
Yeah.
so at the same time that we're seeing orders of magnitude increase in the amount of data, the window of relevancy of that data to make decisions is
Shrinks.
getting smaller and
Absolutely.
smaller.
Yeah.
Which actually brings us to another really interesting point. You know, we've always talked about cloud computing, the fog computing, local versus centralized, you know, clouds or cloudlets, for example. The part that Adam and Kevin just mentioned is timeliness is relevant to how quickly can you get to that in spite of what could be network disruptions. So some part of the policy and intelligence has to be at the edge, because you want to be able to circumvent any operational aspects that could cause a glitch, and hence remove the relevancy of that data. Yeah. So this brings up to the architectural part of these networks as well, as in what becomes localized and what becomes out in the cloud.
Yeah.
I think that some of this functional operational is also a vertical and horizontal differentiation, right? One of the things that I think pretty much all of us have probably learned in IoT is it's a gazillion different segmented verticals, each of which has their own expertise, each of us has their own types of sensors. The data from that's going to be subject to different types of analysis. We can, though, operationalize that infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And that's something that many of us work on,
No,
is how do we have the common infrastructure so we can bring that data together.
Yeah. In fact, I think Kevin said something fairly important during part of the discussion, and that is, you do require deep domain expertise to actually have a solution. Those are our customers. Yep. We don't want to compete with our customers. What we want to do is arm them with the best tools we can so they can actually solve their problems. Okay? And deliver those tools in a way where, again, there isn't some assembly required. It's easy for them to do. You hide the complexity, okay? And you sort of build up the level of trust. This has all the right characteristics. It's got security, it's got trust, I know how to put identity into it, okay? And it's programmable in the end. Okay?
And I think of this as how do we make the cloud easy to consume?
Yeah.
Right? And not only easy, but allow them to use a common infrastructure. So as they get those different verticals onto that same infrastructure,
it lowers the threshold for them to be able to do business
to do
when
more.
you do that.
And also the ability to extract knowledge, learnings, insights that go across the different verticals.
A learning curve built in.
And I think the more we've talked about fog and edge computing and kind of comparing it to cloud, I think the more we've lost sight that the original functional belief of cloud was that it's not tied to any particular location, right? Reality is that I have compute resources available across my entire infrastructure. They sit at the edge, they sit at the core, they sit at my CO locations, they sit at my peering points, they sit in my data centers, they sit in your data centers, they sit in your data centers. It doesn't really matter.
No, it
It's
doesn't.
ubiquitous.
Look, they're just resources, and you allocate them based on what's available, okay, and what the response time can be, essentially.
It's a very interesting point. Before access was ubiquitous and compute was ubiquitous, this was the discussion. I think we have reached post-access point at this point, right? All of this intelligence is taking into account that we have this available.
Almost. I think of the following: a connected car that goes into a rural area, and all of a sudden you don't have any coverage. Okay, it's not connected anymore. Okay? And so, if it was autonomous, I may have a problem at that point. Okay.
But realistically, and I often do hear this argument about, well, we need a certain amount of computing close by or whatever. Realistically, as engineers, we've always built systems that have fail-safes, that have fallbacks, that are
absolutely.
So when it comes down to things like the safety of operation of that car, that's going to be integrated within the vehicle.
And paramount,
right.
by the way.
Now, it may operate less efficiently.
Sure.
It may have to store data for upload later. Some other more, optional features may not be there.
And that brings up the policy aspect, right? That brings up the policy aspect, right?
I think without a doubt, right, all the data can't leave the vehicle because the networks weren't designed to handle the amount of data that's generated from the sensors.
And there isn't always value in doing that. Just because you have data doesn't mean that data is valuable. So.
Right.
I want to stay on the subject of operationalizing digitization, but I want to talk about workforce. And Kevin, I'll go to you first on this. It really applies to your position at Dell EMC. How do you hire the right people at the right time in their careers to solve the right problems?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And I would say that the answer first and foremost is when you find the right people, you hire them, right? Timing notwithstanding. But if we look at the skill sets that are required for digitization and the transformation of the infrastructure and virtualization, software programmability, machine learning, artificial intelligence, keep on going down the list, right? There's really two components of it. One is a deep understanding of data science and computer science. So that's everything from understanding how to build and write algorithms to also understanding how to script and code those algorithms, but also the deep domain expertise. Right, and I think we talked about this earlier from the domain expertise perspective, and I think that there's a cross-training that happens. First off, there's people who are coming out of grad school now that have really deep understanding of the data science and computer science side that you can teach the industry domain expertise to. And then the other piece is taking the domain experts and having them think in a little more of a computer science way and start to upskill them to be able to do the programming, to be able to understand how to apply data science techniques to their day-to-day jobs. So I think it's really going both directions, and you know, when you find the right talent, especially in an industry that's so starved for this level of talent, and there's just not enough coming out of university at this point, you grab them when you find them.
No,
I think.
I was going to say, I mean, you know, sort of historically, I worked at Belcor Telcordia for a while. Okay, and when Belcor spun off from AT&T, there was actually a realization by the folks who were running the organization that they needed people trained very differently than they had been trained in the past, because all of the big digital switches, things of that sort, were just being deployed. Okay? And they actually created a program at Carnegie Mellon, okay, especially for training people that paid for it. And I can tell you the dividends have been absolutely incredible. Those people all turned out to be leaders in their fields.
Any other comment about workforce?
Well, go ahead.
One of the things we've noticed is, you know, coachability is a very key part, because, you know, you're typically getting people for certain skill sets. That's a given, right? There's some level of expertise or experience or education you bring them in. Then coachability, the ability to actually adapt another domain to their existing skill set, what we found is those are the folks who have actually excelled very well. You know, networking and IT have been two, you know, disparate fields. What we've noticed is bring in people who are experts on one side and let them actually then learn the other and actually drive the virtualization transformation. Similarly, bringing in people with networking or IT expertise and then looking at media, you know, content management. Learn that and then be able to mix the amalgamation of an existing skill set with the coachability from another. Those are the types of people that we're looking for, and we've noticed them to do extremely well.
I mean, it's like hiring the best athletes, not the person who can immediately do X, Y, and Z, but, you know, literally somebody who has that capacity to learn and is coachable. This is what you go for.
I do think sometimes, you know, I'm hiring researchers. I need to get people that, you know, have deep technical experience in a particular space. We'll often, as a team, be evaluating, okay, if we hire this individual, are they going to increase our, you know, kind of the concave hull, give us more, you know, kind of more coverage. And, you know, having said that, we also want to know, will they be able to move on to a new project and to a new topic? Now, when we're moving beyond research to, say, the entrepreneurial activities and incubation, I like to have a lot of faith, actually, in our people and our culture as a company. And I think this fits with your coachability. If you've hired coachable people in the first place and you've got the right sort of culture, you ought to be able to reposition a lot of that talent to move into new areas, and they should want to do that.
Yeah. A learning culture, essentially.
So I think having that culture and giving people those opportunities. So, you know, we've had with a number of our projects our work on containers. That was led by people in the case of, you know, our field team that wanted to go out and really get the company into new areas. So, you know, I think it can come from the inside as well as the outside.
Yeah, I think it's just important to have a good understanding of what those skill sets are that you believe you'll need for the future, right? And you get them from your customers. They'll share what they need. You'll get them from your partners. You'll get them from your vendors. You'll kind of build this list of skill sets that you believe you'll need going forward. And it's checking the box as you start to find those right people, right? Obviously, someone who's so siloed into one of those areas is not what you want, but someone with strength in each of the different areas is something you're going to want going forward.
I want to go back to Brad Wall at Disney. He brought up something somewhat interesting. He said that mobile video and on-demand, or his on-demand play as mobile video product is really secondary, or actually he said complementary to broadcast television, that there's astonishingly a lot more people watching TV these days than you would possibly think, and that broadcast television is alive and well. Okay, fine. Someone else in the audience said there's no second screen, there's the only screen, and that's mobile video. Do you think, and Amit, I'll start with you, do you think that broadcast TV is moving quickly enough to mobility? And if not, is that representative of the rest of the industry?
There's a very interesting dynamic I think all of us most likely have looked at, right? The second or the third screen as a support screen, that part you can see is moving quite rapidly, right? Every broadcast network that you see today has got their own web version of it, right? Where you can actually go out to them and they have their own DVR. You can actually go look at their archive programming. You can look at all kinds of additional stuff, right? In terms of the network / cloud-led screen being the first screen, that part appears to be a little slow, right? And you can see that, right? Every quarter there is some sort of an announcement about how the cord cutters are going to just change the whole face of the network. Guess what? Every quarter it keeps happening, and broadcast TV is still alive and well. The advertising dollars are still massively on the broadcast network versus the other, I'll call it the cloud-based networks. So one part of the transformation appears to be happening quite quickly, as in the support screen. But this second or third screen becoming the primary screen appears to be somewhat slower, and I think there's a whole set of reasons for it, right? That we can discuss at length.
So I really disagree there, and I think you've got to meet my teenage children. It's and even between a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, there's a generation gap
difference.
I agree. In how they consume. And so yes, occasionally they'll sit and watch House of Cards with us together, and watch that next episode. But we know really they've already watched it on their handheld.
So I agree. I think what you say is a very fair point. But see, here's where I'm coming from. This dynamic has been there now for years, right? We all expected by now the broadcast, television to be a lot less pervasive, and the amount of money being spent a lot less than it is. So as much as you see the younger generation on it, the older generation, or the generation that has actually been kind of, the people who actually drove broadcast to become the powerhouse that it is, they're still sticking with it.
Well, so I have a very different view from everything that's been said. Okay, it's sometimes hard to predict what a given technology will do. Okay? And what I find is, if I am in a large metropolitan area with 20 million people, and I do a broadcast, I reach an incredible number of people. With a single server, okay, I can deliver material to many, many people, as opposed to taking it over the internet, the normal way that we do it, with an incredible amount of capitalization behind it. Okay? So when I look at things like ATSC3, it might make it, it might not. These things come in waves, okay, and there are some technical weaknesses. If those technical weaknesses are overcome, I think you'll see a resurgence of stuff over the air.
I think, when we talk about primary screen, secondary screen, right, the original reason for the secondary screen was the belief that first screen stayed in place, right? And I think that, technology notwithstanding, because we have to look at what consumers demand.
But this will give you mobility.
But what consumers demand is to be able to watch content anywhere, and they'll select the types of content that they want to consume as a large group sitting in front of a big screen TV, or an even larger screen TV, right, inside of a theater. And they'll decide what content's a little more personal that they want to share only amongst themselves.
It's all true. It's all true, but when you start looking at statistics, you start discovering top 20 titles, okay, 40% of the traffic. Okay. Good way to deliver those, okay, is on a little carousel.
Sure. Okay. Sure, but does that make sense for Netflix over the top? Does that make sense for
Well,
YouTube? Or does that make sense for social content? Does it make sense for sports?
No, but let me put it this way. You know, in the end, Occam's razor sort of tells you do the most sensible things for the functions that you have.
But Adam, I think your evaluation of broadcast actually left out the economics that CDNs provide. So
Yeah.
to the person that's sourcing the content,
Yep.
they don't need that huge number of servers. They're riding on essentially a shared multi-tenant CDN.
Yeah.
Right?
But
so,
even
so it's
I mean,
quite efficient for them.
no, but having worked CDNs, I can tell you it's still it's almost an order of magnitude difference in economics.
Agree from a technology perspective,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, we're going to find that consumers consume content differently depending on the type of content.
And I'm not arguing that. I can tell you what I am arguing is part of that content can be delivered much more efficiently
Of course.
with technologies which we can't even imagine today.
Of
It
course.
can be, but it's a sunk cost. We've got the networks now, we've got the CDNs. I'll tell you what worries me more about the broadcast versus narrowcast
Okay.
is really the social implications. And you know, we saw this, I think, in the recent election. We're seeing it in the fragmentation of the population. As our various media have moved from broadcast to narrowcast to unicast, people essentially are getting isolated within individual thought groups.
Absolutely.
It's getting harder and harder to form sort of a collective societal view to say, okay, as a society, what's our collective will? What are the things we want to accomplish? That's getting much harder to do. Broadcast helped us do it in its era.
So this is
we
the-
need a new communications
So this is
invention.
the dark side of digitization.
It is.
It is, and Adam, to your point, right, in terms of efficiency and economics, I think what we find in technology is that consumer demand always trends towards the most expensive way to do things, and we have to find ways to do it in a more operational, friendly,
Tongue in cheek,
cost-effective
I'm
way.
not going to argue right now.
Well, I think the metadata and digitization topics alone, we could talk about that for days.
For a long
so-
time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so we'll certainly have all of you back. I'd like to thank all of you for being part of the CTO Council meeting here at the Connectivity Jam and also giving us your time here on this panel. It was great. Amit, thanks for your time. Adam, as
Thank you.
always. David, it's
Thank
good,
you.
Good meeting you.
Thank
and
you.
Kevin, it's good meeting you as well.
Thank you.
Good.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
thanks
you.
again.
Yeah.